Hello there, welcome to this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. This week, Sam and Simon are going to continue their conversation around AI guardrails, and today they're going to be looking at unintended consequences, which is a really fascinating topic. There are some amazing examples throughout history of unintended consequences, like how putting on Star Trek Voyager somehow led to Barack Obama being president. Like, it's a whole thing, you should Google it. But when it comes to AI, well, that's certainly something that guardrails need to be put up for, just to make sure that, you don't have an AI that gives incredibly insane answers that lead to all kinds of things that you can't plan for, because, it's unintended. That's kind of in the title. We'll jump over there in a second, but before we do that, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, or feel free to share the video. And if you're in Australia and want to learn more about AI guardrails and what DeepWeaver does in that field, then come and join us on the 12th of September in Sydney. We've got a meetup there. You can find the details in the description down below, or on our school page or our LinkedIn page. There's plenty of places that you can find the info on it. It'll be a fantastic time and a way to learn to look into how AI can impact governance around areas like banking or insurance. All right, now let's jump over to that conversation between Sam and Simon and learn a little bit more about these unintended consequences and the guardrails that we can put up to make sure that they're not too far reaching.
Yeah, and this feeds nicely into the eighth guardrail, which is about managing unintended consequences. We've heard plenty of stories about how AI can do bizarre things that the creators never expected. I guess what we've just discussed is kind of an example of how you can actually anticipate the consequences of something that perhaps you had no intention of delivering.
Yeah, the interesting one about this one when I talk to people is I feel like it's a leading indicator of what happens in number 7, human oversight, because they're fairly tied, right? If you look now, one of Elon Musk's models is having an argument with him, right, about his behavior. Not going to profess to understand what's going on there, but at the end of the day, a lot of times these models tend to do unintended things, right? So there's sort of these emerged properties that come out. I guess the way I look at it and the way I tell customers to think about this is you've got to do comprehensive risk assessments. The whole concept of red teaming and all of that doesn't go out the door with AI. In fact, it's more important, right? So you do have to, at different points in time, do the old break glass and try and deliberately find your own model's weaknesses, right? Otherwise, the first time you see an unintended consequence, you have no idea that there was potentially going to be any drift, right? If you try and break your model a little bit, you'll understand where the drift could occur. But these things, from a developer's perspective, I don't think it's set in every development regime right now that these things can have a knock-on effect in terms of societal impact. We're all rushing to that short-term use case, that sort of sugar hit of I can establish mortgages in half a second. I can settle on loans in this amount of time. I can do all of these things, which is great. But if some of the unintended consequences are giving credit to people that can't afford it or are in a situation where they shouldn't have it, or any number of different things, it becomes an issue. And then if the model starts to drift and use that information against that individual or against that corporation, it can have long-term impacts, right? So you've kind of got to plan for the fact that the model may drift. You've got to set up a regime in a way that you have deliberately tried to break it yourself. Now the challenge in this one comes into fold where you may not have all the skills in your organization, right? So you got to look elsewhere to kind of complement. It's very easy to do red team kind of projects around things that are known state in your environment and reasonably stagnant, right? But now you're going to be processing large amounts of public-private data, commercially in confidence data, various different things, all at the speed of nanoseconds, right? I think if you get the human oversight one right, and you engaged AI models to kind of augment those roles, then the unintended consequences one gets a little bit tighter and a little bit smaller in terms of a risk profile. Still there, but quite, at least from an accountability perspective, you could make it quite manageable. Right?
Yeah. I guess one of the things that's become evident, I guess you would say in the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, is the unintended consequences of something like social media and what impact it's having on mental health, for instance, and how we learn, how we interact socially. That I'd be encouraging people to think not just about their immediate domain of impact, but what are some of the larger macro level unintended consequences that there could be. Uh, and, time will tell whether humans can think that abstractly. But there are definitely bigger risks than just your own area of capability in terms of what it is that you're delivering your AI solution to deliver. And I guess this is where it's important that we start to think about ethics and accountability and governance, not just within an enterprise, but as a social good around AI. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
The concept of purpose, right? What is the purpose of all of these things, right? So if you spend all your time chasing use cases, you could be very successful in the AI space. But to your point, Sam, if what you're doing is making decisions that put people at risk or highlight risks or put them in a worse mental health situation than they are today, whether it's financial stress or they've seen their data used for the wrong reasons and it's impacting them. I always bring this concept. I've met with a few boards recently, and I go, and you've got to think adjacent to what you do as a business, right and left. What happens when things go right? What happens when things go wrong? It's very easy to get wrapped up in your own business process and optimizing that, but at the end of the day, you hear every day of mental health issues related to social media. So we should treat that as a leading indicator of things that happen really quickly, can be good and can be really bad, right? So how do we be mindful of that as we develop these models so that we don't put people in situations of financial hardship or expose things to their partner that they didn't want exposed, or there's a number of different situations. But what we need to aim to doing is more around societal good than chasing those use cases that give you a more healthy P&L. Right?
Yeah.
There's a balance there. So.
Yeah. Well, or chasing the hamster wheel of shareholder returns at any cost.
Hey, thanks for checking out this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. Don't forget, this is part of the series. This is the penultimate episode, so there's one more to go. And you can find that all on the playlist on our YouTube page, or you can scroll back through our podcasts that we've done if you're having a listen to this. Either way, they're there for people to have a listen to or a watch whenever they feel like, and you might want to sit down and binge it. It's about an hour long if you binge it all together. All right, make sure if you haven't already to hit that like button or subscribe to the channel. And until next time, look after yourself, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and we will catch you all next time.